This is somewhat a funny situation. Funny to me because I have been so engrossed in the responses of Canada and in particular Justin Trudeau's response to what's been going on with the tariffs, and of course taking little glances, side glances I might call them, of what else has been happening based on the new president that the United States recently inaugurated, that I totally missed a very important bit of news. And it's so interesting that when I saw it yesterday on YouTube, I wanted to go get the sources because, the person I am, I don't like to talk off the cuff, and I don't like to talk after other people. So I didn't have to look far, because as I went through that particular video, the source was quoted, and it was in fact determined that Marco Rubio, a Cuban American who is now a part of the United States government, made a bold statement to Caribbean politicians that their visas will be revoked in the event that their island countries choose not to stop utilizing the services of Cuban doctors and nurses in the Caribbean, in their home territories. And I tell you, I had a wave of emotions. I mean, I saw 10 different things at the same time, and I was trying to sort it out until I saw two other bits of stories. And excuse me, where did that come from? One spoke of the response of Guyana. Now, Guyana is a part of the British Commonwealth. It is also a part of CARICOM. And Guyana basically, in their response, said, we need to talk about this, We can't just unilaterally accept this position. We need to talk about these persons and the contribution that they bring to our economies. And we also need to talk about our relationship in CARICOM with the USA. The Prime Minister of Barbados, this woman, she is so strong. She came out all guns blaring and she made her big statement. Now, for me, I am not following politics in terms of how politics impact, or how politicians do what they do. More importantly for me is the impact that it has on the persons who are being served. So Prime Minister Motley, she came out and she made her big statement. And so those are the only two I had heard until I got a clip from our Minister of Health. And this is Dr. Tufton. Now, I don't know what I expected, but hearing Dr. Tufton saying that medical practitioners, doctors, nurses from Nigeria, India, and the Philippines may now need to be contracted to replace Cubans, it basically gave into the narrative that politicians and their close families have already made the decision that no, we cannot afford to lose our access to the US. No, we will not lose having a US visa. So we have to look elsewhere, have to do things otherwise. And the purpose of this video is what happened in my mind on a personal level as I listen to all of these responses. And my flashback starts all the way back in the early 1990s when the company I then worked with, Super Clubs, they began building strong relations with Cuba, and they had an exchange. As a matter of fact, they had a hotel in Puerto Vallarta, in Baradero, and they started to do an intercambio of skills. And so the first Cubans that I remember really being in touch with came through that program. And of course, being the Spanish translator for the company, they found me and I was given charge of them being the Cubans who were now working in our hotels on an exchange program basis, to ease them into the culture and the language and so on. And it opened me up to what life in Cuba was like. And so some of the friendships were stronger than others because people are people. And it didn't stop there, because shortly after I met Mr. Brown, it's an easy name to say, and he was married to a Cuban, Natasha. I wonder if you'll ever see this video. And what I found interesting, Mr. Brown was from Portmore just like me, and he was the night manager at the property that I was transferred to, and he loved Natasha. I found it very warming, because to see a man talk about his wife that much and to be so loving, and also to be so concerned with the fact that she didn't speak as much English as she needed, but she was here in Jamaica, she had been here for a while, and she also by now had one child. He was very, very watchful of her, very careful, very caring. And so eventually I met her and a fast friendship began. And as we continued on the journey of my relationships with Cubans, I was introduced one night to this wonderful doctor. Had eyes on him too, I'll tell you that story if you ask. Even him, he doesn't know the story. And like the welcoming committee that I eventually saw myself as, they brought the young doctor to me and introduced him. And of course, he was new to Jamaica, just out of medical school, and he was based at the St. Anne's Bay Hospital. And so we became fast friends. He had a very gentle persona, wonderful, kind, short. And I say that because, everybody, when they're looking, they're kind of hoping for 6 feet and up and all of that foolishness that I don't know what's in the minds of young girls, but hey. So having met this Cuban doctor and developing this friendship, I was like, right. So my doctor friend, who's very, very popular, so he shall remain nameless, he was Jamaican Cuban, so his mother is Jamaican, but for some reason, and I know he told me, but that was like going 30 years ago, he had not come to Jamaica until it was the end of his career. Maybe the thought was he would literally get himself all set and then he would join his mom in returning to Jamaica. Whatever that story was, though, he became a good friend and he pulled me even deeper into the Cuban network that was in the parish of St. Anne where I resided. And so year upon year, I watched him grow, and he moved out of St. Anne's Bay Hospital, got his own practice. He became the doctor on call for a lot of the properties in St. Anne. And oh yes, y'all know him. Yes, I won't even say his name. That same doctor. Yes, that one. And he has always been a friend, wonderful friend. As a matter of fact, our last encounter in Fontana, I was able to say, you know, Doc, I'm feeling something over here. I don't know how many of you have that doctor friend. And he quickly wrote me a prescription and then directed me to go see a specialist and just tell him that I sent you. So that is the relationship of 30 years that has developed with this Cuban. And yes, I'm going somewhere with this because I stop and I think about all the other Cubans that I have met. And the more I think, the more I go deeper down this road, this memory lane. You know, I think of nurses. Oh, there was this nurse once at Dunn's River, and she was there for quite a while. That was during the time when I was a Spanish and Portuguese tour guide, and I was able to escape the blistering sun by just going to sit and chat with her in the nurses station while the capable guides led my clients up the Duns River Falls. Wonderful lady, and her husband, who was a technical person, I think he was an engineer, he also worked at the falls as a tour guide. And I thought about it and I said, listen here now, persons come here very skilled, very trained, very degreed, but they have to do whatever works for them. And having chatted with him many times, he said, oh, this pays far better than working in the hospitals. And so for her, as a government employee, but somewhere public-private sector partnership was, you know, that environment, it worked out for them. And so I tell you all of these stories. And before we leave the storytelling, because you know storytelling is the art of this channel, I almost could have gotten married to a Cuban. That dear story time. But the short of the story time with that was, this was an engineer. He came to Jamaica. His sister had sent for him and another sister, I'm not sure in which order, but there were two of them here with the sister who was already married to a Jamaican. I think she met the Jamaican in Cuba because he studied in Cuba. And I bring up kind of all of that to show the intrinsic relationship. And this is over 30 years worth of people meeting and relationship building that I'm speaking to. You know, he went to Cuba to study and he met this pretty little girl. That's what he speaks of her to be to this day. And they got married, and it's been, oh goodness, oh, if my son wasn't born yet, it's way past 30 years. And they are living together happily ever after, for want of a better term. And I think, oh my goodness, look at these relationships. So her brother, when he was introduced to me, you know, him started to chat me up. No, he was past the 6 feet, but him did lanky. And somehow there was nothing about him that attracted me. He wasn't ugly, nothing about him, but you know, attraction is a thing, right? So after maybe about 2 visits, he would walk by my house because he lived on the other side of the hill. And so he would come by my house occasionally, you know, chit chat, but he was talking to me not about getting into a relationship, but about getting married. Now you can imagine, I was in my early 20s. I was like, huh? Married? Me? Why? I was very anti-marriage. And at that age and that stage in my life, no, I don't think so. It was long after that I understood that his proposal was not so much a proposal for marriage in the typical sense of the word. It was a proposal to assist him in stabilizing, normalizing his residency. Man, I have stories to tell. And I like when these things happen because it pulls stories out of my mind and it makes me go, oh my God, I've certainly lived a full life. But no, I did not think he wasn't serious, but I knew that was not the direction that I wanted to go. yeah, there are a few other things that I would say, but I'll reserve those thoughts. Yes, yes, yes. But before I close off this particular discussion, I think of two other scenarios. One which was very life-changing, one which saved potentially two lives. Well, there are two lives that were involved, and two lives were saved. And that is the relationship that I had fostered with another doctor. This doctor was Jamaican, and he trained in Cuba. Gynecology was his area of specialty. And without getting into the full story, my friend, Dr. Wolf, I can call his name, he realized I was on the maternity ward with high blood pressure at about 7 months pregnant. And being a friend, he came over and, hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Qué haces aquí? Ay, no sabía que eres embarazada, que estás embarazada y todo eso, ¿no? And we're chatting away in Spanish. And he made it his point of duty, even though I was not his patient, to follow up with me and make sure I was fine. And when it was delivery time, I was admitted. My doctor, Dr. Hall, everybody also knows Dr. Hall, the gynecologist for St. Anne or for Ochi. He basically would have been on call in the event that I needed him. And I did not need him because Dr. Wolf stepped in. I had high blood pressure. It was getting very chronic. The baby was not moving. There was no heartbeat. There was a true scare that mother and or child would not make it out alive. And Dr. Wolf, Dr. Loxley Wolf, may he live forever. May his children and grandchildren and his seed across wherever they are be blessed forever. That's a blessing I send to him continually. Because you see, in the hands of Dr. Wolf, not only was a safe delivery done of my almost 30-year-old son now, but I'm fine. I'm here. I'm alive. And so I tell the stories because you see, a lot of people, they get into the excitement of who's right, who is wrong, what's politically correct, what has happened, what should not happen, and they go on. Me, it's the personal interaction. And this is just a tip of the iceberg, and this is how I've always felt. When people's lives are involved and you use policy and politics to make a blanket decision, how do you really, or how would you respond if you got into the stories? So I'm going to invite you to join me in the comment section regarding this topic, and maybe you have your own story. Let's talk about it. As usual, Sheri has lots to say, but until then, ciao for now.